Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It's Monday, July 14th, a little before 8 o'clock at night when I'm starting to record this video. And this will be our review or recap coverage for YieldMax funds, Ulti, the Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund, and LFGY, the crypto industry and tech portfolio option income ETF. They are both weekly paying funds. And before we go into it, just the usual reminder, I'm on X at ETF_inspector1, where I add a link and a little description letting you know when videos are coming out or when they're premiering. Every once in a while, it only just shows this. I know that people are less likely to click on a link than they are on a thumbnail, but just know that when I'm posting that, it's the reason it didn't show the picture. I'm going to put a link in the top of this video for any new people. All right, I made a video here. It says start here, all you need to know, FAQs, frequently asked questions. So I'll try to get that link to be somewhere up here in this video. If you've never watched my video before, you might want to pause this one and click on that link to go watch this video, then come back, because I'm going to stop explaining things over and over again in videos, and I just grouped it all into one. Sorry about the smoke detector. We just lost power a minute ago, so now I hope that's not going to keep on doing that the whole time. All right, so stock market today, as far as our two funds are concerned, lots of green. For the most part, most things were up, only a couple down. So Ulti overall was up 1.29% to 629. Most stocks within the fund were green. Then we scrolled down. LFGY was up 1.12%. Gave back, well, it says red, but it's same price. So to 40.50. Seriously. And most stocks within that fund were green as well. If that's going to keep up, I will move because it's really just the one down here by me. I went into the basement to get some quiet, but our smoke detectors are connected to the power, so that's why it's beeping at me. Okay, so we'll start with Ulti for trades. All right, if you watched the weekend video, that would let you know that on Friday there were a lot of new purchases. So we put that money to use, buying into more of each of the, almost all of the stocks within the fund. All right, I'm gonna move real quick. So sorry about this. I'm not starting the video over, so I'm just gonna move upstairs to get away from this one smoke detector. It's not the battery, it's that we just lost power. All right, sorry about that. We're upstairs now. So you might hear kids go running by or the dog or something like that, but okay, so we put all that money to use, buying more, except for one difference was we added Netflix. So if you saw in the thumbnail, there was a little plus sign next to Netflix over in Ulti. We bought 30,000 shares of that for about 38 million. Okay, those trades, we don't count them as losses because putting money to use is not a loss. But then we go ahead down to the trades. So anytime we add new shares, we go ahead and add to the option strategy that's already within it. So when you see a SS, that's a sell short, that's selling the call, that's where we generate the income, and then the B is buying the put in that case. So then when we get into some BCs, that's buying to close calls that we have already sold short. And again, we already explained the SS. All right, so AAOI and AMD, we just put more money to work. So AAOI collected 40,000. AMD is not a collar strategy. It is a debit spread. So when we put more money to work that way, we actually bought more of our in the money call. So that looks like a loss, but it's not a loss. So we'll just call that a debit because it is still money spent. APP, it's AppLovin. We went ahead and rolled a portion of the shares, portion of the options. I think there's about 1,570 contracts, so we closed out half of them because the stock went up so much. So we took a loss on them, sold at a higher strike, still within the same week. $1.1 million loss on that. ASTS, Coin, First Solar, and Hood. This is all just adding to the option strategy to go along with the new shares, collecting 119,000, 41,000, 34,000, and 81,000. IonQ, I believe they had already rolled these last week when the stock was real high, so they selected a nice high strike price. Then Friday was a down day, so I don't think today was necessarily down too much if I remember correctly, but it's nowhere near those original strikes. So we closed those out for 12 and 18 cents, sold new ones for 54, 55 cents. Then we actually sold even more to go along with the new shares we purchased. All in all, it was a net positive of $545,000 for us. LabU, just selling more options to go with the new shares, $121,000 profit. Mara, closing out the 19s and the 2250s. So this might have been one where they made a couple moves. So we closed out the 19s, paying $1.69. They were a loss. Then we sold 2250s for 30 cents, then bought them back for 10 cents. So we made up 20 cents worth of ground there. Then we sold them finally at $20 for 43. So although we kind of took a loss, we made a little bit of ground intraday trading there. Did the same thing with the puts. So overall, lost $132,000 on the trade today. MicroStrategy, another one went up through our strike price. Had to pay a lot to close them out. Sold the new ones. When you're paying $23 and you're selling for $5, you're taking a loss. $1.2 million. Netflix, this is just we just bought into the fund, so we went ahead and sold the maximum amount of options we could. $420,000 credit. Oklo, another one. The underlying went up beyond our strike price on the call, so we had to pay to close them out. And sold new ones, still staying within the same week, but had to roll them up by $9. $2.6 million loss. Palantir, another one up through our strike price, paying to close them out, $5.69, selling the new ones for $1.90. Then we sold some more, a little closer to collect more premium to go with the new shares. $973,000 loss. Reddit and Rigetti, this is just selling more options to go with the new shares, $85,000 and $44,000 credits. RH, we don't own any shares, but since we got some more money, we put some more to use. So we closed out 324 of our 227.50s and rolled them down to 215s. So that was a win, a credit, right? But then we also put more money to work. So we bought more of our 190s and sold more 215s. So obviously the 190 calls are going to cost more than the 215s are going to bring in. So that's a $214,000 debit, but just don't forget, that's not a losing trade. That's putting more money into the trade that we're going to close out at the end of the week. That's a debit spread. That's where you put the money in up front and then you see what you win at the end, compared to a credit spread where you collect the most you're going to possibly get and then you pay out at the end to close it out. Okay, SMCI, just selling more options to go with the new shares purchased, $47,000 profit. SMR, another one that went through our strike price, had to pay to close them out. Sold new ones, still kept it within the same week, just had to roll the strike up. $1.7 million loss. Tesla, selling new options to go with the new shares, $37,000 credit. Upstart, I think this was another one where they, maybe not. Couldn't remember. There were a couple that they played that intraday trading, but I don't think this is the one. So closing out for these actually worked well in our favor. So we closed these 82.50s and the 84s, and we sold 77s still within the week. So we took the win, tried to make some more premium by bringing the strike down closer to the current price. 1.3, almost $1.4 million profit. Vertiv closed out some of our 120s and sold 131s with those, and then we put more money to use. Again, this is one where we don't own any shares, so it's just a debit spread. So overall debit of $677,000 there. And Vistra Corp, another debit spread. We just put more money into it, bought more of the 180s, sold more of the 20250s, $289,000 debit. So we total those up. We did not include buying of shares. That's not a trading loss. But it was a $6.1 million loss. Call it debit, right? Because it's not all losses. Again, there's 4 different instances in the fund where we have spreads instead of the collar strategy. So we have to put money in to use. Every time money comes in, we're spending more to put into that position. So it's not all loss, but it is overall debit on the account of $6 million. And as you can see, that's got a lot to do with it because our stocks went up so much, they went beyond their strikes on a lot of them. All right, so as we go through, Applied Optoelectronics, or AAOI, up 3.8%. So the options are still 5% out of the money, so nothing was done with them. AMD, we don't own any shares. That's why you don't see that gray line with shares. So just the contracts. These we want these in the money. The 139s. The stock's at 146.24. It's in a beautiful position for this debit spread. So we like that. AppLovin, this was the one we talked about where they swapped out about 800 of the contracts, so nearly half. So they went into the money after today's 6% increase by 2.36%. So we left 773 of them alone, and we rolled the other 800 out to a different strike price. We'll have that information in the morning. AST Space Mobile up 5%. They're still out of the money on these calls by just a small amount, 0.29%. They didn't take any action there. Coinbase up 1.8%. Went into the money by 0.38% on these 392.50s, but they chose not to take any action. A lot of time premium left that can decay away. So as long as the stock doesn't run up too high, too fast, they're going to just let these, decrease in the value so we can pay less to close them out. First Solar, this was the big loser of the day on the fund, so down almost 1%. That's why this over here is in red, a color. One in red and one in green, showing the biggest gainer and biggest loser of actual stocks that we hold. Contracts are 5.7 and 7.2% out of the money. No need to take any action for them today. Robinhood up 1.6%. Still out of the money on both sets of strikes. The calls, 102s are 2% and 106s are 6% out of the money. IonQ went up 1.5%, but this was one where we talked about when they rolled these, the stock was much higher, so they had these high strike prices. Stock dropped on Friday, so even though it went up today, it still didn't come anywhere close. So they closed those out for a win and rolled to a new strike within the week. They left the protective put alone, though. They didn't swap that out. LabVIEW up over 4%, still 0.5% out of the money. No action was taken on the options. Mara up 0.37%. Not sure why they closed these out and rolled them. They're only 1% in the money, but they did. So there's still 1950s and 20s that are 1.5 and 4.1% out of the money where no action was taken. MicroStrategy, these we started in the money before the week even started. Then with today's increase, because of Bitcoin going up so much in the off hours, they were 5.2% in the money. That's why they rolled them. But they did leave the 445s alone, even though they're also 1.3% in the money. Oklo, one of the highest gainers for the day, but not the highest. So up over 11%. That took, these 57s way in the money. They went ahead and rolled them, and the 60s are almost 4% in the money, but they left them alone. They didn't roll those. Palantir up almost 5%, taking every strike price on their options in the money. They only rolled the deepest in the money, 145s. We still have 147s and 148s that are 1.4 and 0.7% in the money. So they will be, as long as it trades sideways, they'll continue to decrease in value throughout the week. Now they'll be much higher than that because that's where things closed on Friday. Again, the holdings don't update until the morning after a trading day. So they will be much more pricey now. Obviously, the stock 149 with a strike of 147. These will be at a minimum 215 or more, but that would mean there would be no time value, which there is plenty of time value. So these will probably be $3, $4, $5. So we don't want that because that's a negative. That's something we've got to pay to close out. Reddit up a little over 0.5%. Still 1.7 and 2.4% out of the money on those options. No action was taken. Rigetti up 4.8%. Fortunately, they were pretty far out of the money to start with, so even after the increase, we're still 5.7 and 9.6% out of the money. No action was taken on those options. RH, here's another one where we don't own any shares. We just have a debit spread. So the 190s are 6% in the money, and then we have 220s and 227.50. So we would like the stock price to go up. Unfortunately, it went down today. It went down more than our 0.98% decrease, but since we don't own shares, it didn't have an effect on share value increases and decreases. But they went ahead and rolled these 324s. They closed them out, and they bought the 324 correlating contracts in the 190s out, but they still have 190 and 220 for the rest of them. So we would like the stock, best case scenario would be the stock to go up to 220. SMCI up 1%, still 4.5 and 6.5% out of the money on those 52s and 53s. No action taken. New Scale Power, that's SMR, had the biggest increase on the day, 12.3%, taking everything into the money. They've rolled the 38s and their associated puts. They left the 39s alone, even though they are 7.3% in the money. So we're hoping for a pullback. But as you can see, right, we talked about all the different losses. Here's one example. That 12% increase resulted in a $5.7 million increase in the value of this one stock alone. So you get a whole lot more. That's why Jay Pestricelli over at YieldMax, when you see his interviews, he says we're perfectly fine if the underlying blows right through the sold strike. That's still a win for us. Tempest AI up 1.6%. Still 7.2% out of the money on those 62s. No action taken. Tesla up a little over 1%. They started in the money going into the week, and now we're even further in the money. But they didn't take any action, so they're 3.7% in the money. So pretty expensive to close out. Upstart dropped 0.8%. They started out pretty far out of the money, so that was enough for them to go ahead and decide to take the win. So they rolled these options to a closer strike to collect more premium. Last two, VRT and Vistra Corp. So that's Vertiv Holdings and Vistra Corp. Don't own shares in either, just have these debit call spreads. So we have purchased VRT at 100 and 108, and then we have sold calls at 120, 122, and 125. With the stock at 124, that works out good for the 125s, but it leaves the 120s and the 122s a little expensive to close out. We did close the 120s out, actually. That's why I've got that orange there. So we're not worried about 120. Basically, best case scenario would be for the stock to get up to, but not go beyond 122. So the money collected selling these gets to be kept, and we don't have to pay much to close them out. And then we get to sell these 100s and 108s for a nice profit at 120, 124, 122, wherever we sell it. Vistra Corp, same thing, purchased at 180. We have sold calls at 202.50 and 205. So best case scenario would be for the stock to end the week just under 202.50. It went down 0.1% to 194.81. So all those moves, mostly green, a little bit of red, resulted in a $30,892,795 increase in value to the fund. Not bad. Not our biggest day ever, but definitely a good day. All right. Before the day started, we have $1.2 billion in net assets. We'll see tomorrow morning if more people bought into the fund. Probably did. We're probably over 200 million shares now. But now let's go ahead and get into LFGY. All right. This one goes a lot quicker. Much fewer stocks within the fund, and we don't have as many trades to talk about either. I did forget to show you this, right? There was basically 200 trades for us to talk about between Ulti. Here was all our trades. And then we skipped Biggie. And then LFGY. So it was like 120 trades for Ulti and like 80 trades for LFGY. We start out with shares themselves. This was only sales. I would assume that if we did some quick math here and we totaled up all the shares they sold, it will come out to, well, oof, that's not a good sign. So let's see if we took that and divided it by our outstanding shares, 4.2 million equals that divided by 4. That's like 54 cents a share. It's always going to be a little high, just because they're factoring in the possibility of people buying more shares. I want to say last week it came out to like 51 or 52, and I forget what they paid us. Like last week they paid us 48, and I think their sales came out to 51 and change. So if that goes the same, then maybe we're going to get a 50-cent distribution. We will see. We'll find out on Wednesday. My guess, reminder, was 47, even though the IV estimate was 48.65. All right, let me get back to our, what's the word, regular programming. Okay, but so that doesn't count. We don't count selling of shares or buying of shares towards our options premium. So with these guys, they do a whole lot of individual trades. In this case, right, it's a lot of it's got to do with if they sold the shares, then they got to sell the contracts and the options contracts to go with them. But sometimes they even just do a bunch of little trades anyway. Three options at a time. So we don't go through these line by line the way we do in Ulti because they don't total much of anything. But we do still highlight when we have a full roll. So we had a roll in part of the position on MBTX, closing out the 260s and selling 295. So anytime you had to roll up and out, that means the underlying went beyond your strike price. So these are all the way out to August 15th now at 295. And even going out a month, we still only collected $9 to $10 after paying $27, $28. So it was a $788,000 loss on that one. Didn't have any more rolls other than that. So that's it for the options trading. It totaled a loss of $805,000 on the day trading options for LFGY. You can see there's your increase in value of the fund. So again, mostly green, mostly green as far as underlying stocks, not these in the money, out of the money options. Okay, BitDeer up a little over 2%, took them just in the money, less than 0.1%, no action taken there. Clean Spark down 0.4%. These options are looking like we got a good chance of winning, 11% out of the money, no action taken. Really, it's going to be no action taken on all of them except for MBTX, so I don't have to keep saying that. Coinbase up 1.8%. We started the week already in the money. Fortunately, this is the smaller of the positions. There's only 33 contracts at 382.50. The ones we definitely need to win is the 400s, and they are currently 1.5% out of the money. Core Scientific, big day, up over 8%. Fortunately, we had sold these 18-19% out of the money, so we're still 10.6% out of the money, feeling nice and safe there. Circle Internet Group was the biggest gainer for the day, 9.27% increase. Again, we were fortunate that we had already sold these so far out of the money because they are still 8.7% out even after today's gain. Galaxy Digital had a nice day, up almost 4%. Still 0.23% out of the money on the 2150s and 7+% out of the money on the 23s, but there's only 48 contracts there. We need to win the 2150s. There's 1,100 plus contracts at that strike. GameStop up a little over 1.5%. Took us in the money by 0.84%, but they're going to go ahead and let them ride and see if they come back down, or if nothing else, if we can just get that time value to decay away throughout the week. Robinhood up 1.65%. Yet another one. We started the week in the money, and it went further, but they chose not to roll them. So they must have a feeling that it's going to give some of that back. Robinhood's been on an absolute tear for the last month. Hut 8 Corp up 1.3%. Took us in the money on those 22s, but it's 250 contracts compared to almost 4,000. We need to win the 23s. They're just about 4% out of the money. IBIT up 1.44%. We don't have any options, so we just want to see that one climb because that just helps our overall value. Mara Holdings up 0.37%, still 9.3% out of the money on those 21s. MBTX, this is what we talked about in the roll. We have multiple little, I call them combos here, okay? So we had these July 18th, sold the 260, bought the 285. So that was a credit call spread. We lost that trade. They went too far in the money. They rolled them out to August 15th. So I believe they combined them with what's already here for August 15th. These 295s, they're still 3.92% out of the money. So they're looking okay. I know it says 6 contracts. I believe we combined those. Let's take a quick look. I think we went, 295, 320. So now we're going to have 543 more, so it'll be 549. And then they also have a debit call spread or a debit put spread, where they purchased the 230 put and sold the 150. Those are out till the end of the year. For those to win, this actually needs to go in the money. That's why it's in blue, because we wouldn't want something that we want in the money to be red. That would be confusing. But they are way out of the money. So losing on all sides of this MBTX trade. Mercado Libre down 0.3%, 2,380, 3.35% out of the money on that one option there, and then almost 8% out of the money on these 2570s. MicroStrategy up 3.78%. Took the 450s in the money. The 460s are still almost 2% out of the money. No action taken there. NU Holdings up 1.87%. We've got 4,200 contracts that are 3.2% out of the money and 329 contracts that are 7% out of the money. NVIDIA was the big loser as far as stocks we actually own shares in, down 0.5%. And that basically, we were pretty much at the money and we dropped about 0.5% out of the money. So if it could sit right there all week, we would make out well. Opera up 0.87%, still 7.5% out of the money on those 20s. PayPal up 3.5%, still 2.8% out of the money on our 76s. Riot platform went up 0.72%. It was enough to take these 1250s in the money, but there's only 400 contracts there. I say only, but compared to 6,500 contracts at 13, they're still almost 4% out of the money. And finally, Block, or XYZ, had a big day, up 5.4%. Fortunately, we were far enough away, so they are still 3.3% out of the money. Overall, you saw an increase of $3,684,777. Now, that doesn't look like the number that I just had, so numbers must have updated. They did. Numbers updated again after I started. So I will change that. We'll do it right now just so we don't forget. Only takes a second. Doesn't really make too much of a difference, but we want to get as close as we can. And then all right, so just a recap, right? Trading wise, LFGY lost 800,000 and increased share value wise by 3.6 million. Let me just show you real quick. I did show you 4.2 million still outstanding shares and roughly 167 million being managed in the fund. And recap on Ulti was I'll call it a debit. I don't want to call that a trading loss because a lot of it was putting money to use in a debit spread, but 6.1 million to the negative on trading wise and almost 31 million increase in overall value. All right, so that's everything I've got for you for the video. If you made it this far, you deserve the dad joke of the day. Before I do, as always, I just want to thank everybody. You guys actually made the Friday, the week look ahead, my most viewed video ever. I know that says 1.7, but it's up over 1.8 now. And we have already gone 500 plus subscribers beyond that original goal of 1,000. So we're shooting for the new goal of 2,000, right? We should be there pretty soon. So let everybody know that we make these videos if they're interested in what their money's doing inside Ulti and LFGY. But thank you for everything. And dad joke of the day. Why don't phones ever go hungry? Because they have plenty of apps to choose from. Okay. Have a good night and good luck trading tomorrow. See you in the Tuesday video.